Today's daf is daf ches. And as a springboard for today's daf, we'll just mention on daf Zayin Amud Beis, the shita that we said yesterday, and we discussed, and that's Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan's shita, which is quoted here on daf Zayin Amud Beis, approximately 8 lines up from the bottom, is that if you have a round sukkah, then you have to have a size that could sit 24 people around the inside of the sukkah. And the Gemara explains that the reasoning behind Rabbi Yochanan's ruling is that he paskins like Rebbe. Rebbe was of the opinion that a sukkah has to be relatively large. There are other shittas that would have it at 7 tefachim, but he has it at 4 amos square. And what Rebbe is doing for us, setting up a sukkah minimum size 4 amos square, is that when you have a round sukkah, you have to imagine putting that round circle inside a square. And therefore, you're going to have to figure out the exact diameter of a sukkah, such that if you would put a square outside the circle, you would have 4 by 4 amos, 4 amos square. And the Gemara postulates that the ratio between a circle and a square is a ratio of 1 to 3. And therefore, the Gemara assumes that if you have 4 amos square, then you're going to have to multiply 4 times 3 in order to fit the circle in the square. Again, when we say 1 to 3 is the ratio, it means let's say you have a diameter of 1 tefach, the circumference around the circle will be 3 amos. That's not exactly precise, but as Rashi points out here on the bottom of Zayin Amud Beis, we derive this from what's called the Yam Shel Shlomo, and there he had a diameter in his pool of 10 amos, and the circle around the pool, the Tanakh reports, was 30 amos. So you have a ratio of 1 to 3, and that's a round number. Be that as it may, the Gemara says if you're working with the ratio of 1 to 3, and you have to get a square of 4 by 4 amos for your sukkah, then the diameter of the sukkah should be 12 amos. Meaning, if you multiply, let's say 12 by 3, you get 24. Why? 12 by 3. I'm sorry. What was I multiplying? Remind me again. Just 1 second. Let me get this straight. The Gemara says, 4. You have a square of 4 amos. Right, that's the size of the sukkah. So now, if you want to get the circumference of a circle that would surround 4 by 4 amos, you're going to multiply 4 by 3, and you're going to end up with 12. Why does Rabbi Yochanan require 24? That doesn't make any sense. And here's where we start our daf for today on daf Ches Amud Aleph. The Gemara answers, Hani Mili, when is it true that if you have a diameter of, let's say, 1 tefach, we'll give that example, then the circumference would be 3 tefachim, and that's a ratio of 1 to 3. That's only be'igula. Aval beribua, if you want to calculate we'll call it the parameter of a square, then by tfeh, you need a circumference or a parameter more than 3 tefachim. Notice the ratio is no longer 1 to 3. And therefore, if you have what's called an igul, a circle, and you're talking about the diameter of the circle, and the circle is now placed in the middle of a square, so the square is around the circle, then you're going to need a larger ratio. It's not enough to have a ratio of 1 to 3. So you cannot just multiply 4, which is your 4 amos square, by 3 in order to get a parameter of a square around the circle. So the Gemara now analyzes mathematically, what would be the increment? How much would you have to add in order to get the square? Michti, kama maruba yoser al ha'igul. How much larger is the parameter of the square compared to the diameter of a circle? And the Gemara says that the answer to that question is revia. What does that mean, revia? You're going to have to add a revia. Revia means 1/4. Now, if you're going to have, you started with 4 amos. You multiplied it by 3 in order to get the diameter of a circle. You ended up with 12 amos. Now you're going to have to add another 1/4. If you're going to add another 1/4 in order to get the square outside the circle, then b'shitzar sagi. By adding 1/4 to the number 12, you jack it up to the number 16 amos. But we still don't have Rabbi Yochanan's requirement of 24 amos. How did Rabbi Yochanan jump from, in this case, 16 amos, which is going to be the parameter of your square, to 24 amos? He should have had a what's called a diameter of 16 amos, not 24 amos. So there's a discrepancy here between 16 amos, where we add 1/4 to 12 amos, and Rabbi Yochanan's 24 amos. How did he expand it to 24 amos? So now the Gemara is going to make the following distinction. Gemara is going to say that you've been assuming until now that we're putting the circle inside the square. The Gemara now wants to suggest, no, we have to put the circle outside the square. And as soon as you put the circle outside the square, you have to add the corners, the 4 corners. Why do you So let's see the Gemara inside and see if we can work that out. Hani Mili, says the Gemara, you're correct that the diameter of the circle could be 16 amos. That's only the eagle did nafik migo ribua. That's only if the circle is on the inside of the ribua. Migo means mitoch inside the ribua. So the ribua is the square, the eagle is the circle is being placed inside the square. And in such a case, if the circle has a rocham, if it would have a diameter of 4 amos, then the hekev, meaning the parameter of the square, would be a little bit larger than the diameter of the circle. And that discrepancy would be only 1/4. So you jack it up from 4 times 3 is 12 and add another 1/4 is 16. But here in the case of a sukkah, it's not enough that the size of the circle is equal to the size of a square. In other words, just simply put a square around the circle, because if you did that, you'd come up with a circumference of 16 amos, but rather we need ribua denofik migo igula. Now watch how the Gemara changed it. Until now, we've been assuming igula denofik migo ribua, right? That the eagle is inside the ribua. Now we're saying no, it's a ribua denofik migo igula, that the circle is inside the square. So you have a maruba, a square of 4 amos by 4 amos, and now you're going to, instead of putting that on the outside of the circle, with the circle on the inside, we're now going to put the circle on the outside in such a way that the eagle, he used the Hebrew word lachkok, saying that now what you have to do is you have to have a larger circle that encompasses the entire square, and the square is now lachkok, means it's engraved, so to speak, inside the circle. Until now, we've been engraving, if I could use that term, the circle inside the square. Now we're engraving the square inside the circle. And therefore, boitfe, you need more. Now, in the note here, he says, she'igul sheshitcho shavel l'shetach shel meruba shel arba amos al arba amos. In other words, if you want to get the space of a circle to be equal to the space of a square that's 4 amos by 4 amos, then what you're going to have to do is you're going to have that square inside the circle. And therefore, the rochav, the diameter of the circle is going to have to be much larger. Let me read to you the footnote here in the English translation. He says the following. Rabbi Yochanan discusses a round sukkah, not a square one. That sukkah must be able to contain within it a square of 4 by 4 amos, which is the minimum size of a sukkah, according to Rebbe. So therefore, we must determine the circumference, meaning the smallest circumference of a circle that encompasses the square. You follow? Because again, the square is the minimum size of a sukkah, which is 4 by 4 amos. Now you've got a round sukkah. That round sukkah has to encompass within it the square of 4 by 4 amos. Since the circle arches from corner to corner, while the square has a straight line from corner to corner, its circumference is obviously greater than that of a square. And now the Gemara is going to actually come up with a mathematical calculation of how to cover that extra area of the corners of the square in order to expand the circumference of the circle. And the Gemara says, that boitfe, mishum mursha de karnasa, right? Those are the 4 corners, the 90-degree angles on all 4 sides or corners of the square. And therefore, the sukkah gola, the round sukkah, has to be wider. You know, it has to have basically it has to have a diameter, which would be equal to the diameter of a square of 4 by 4 amos. Right? So again, your diameter is what do you call this thing? A line that goes in that direction as opposed to, in Hebrew it's called an alaxon. How do you say that in diagonal? Excellent, a diagonal. So the diagonal of a square now has to equal to the diameter of a circle. And now the Gemara is going to calculate how much you have to add. Every amma that's squared, amsa utrei chumshe balaksona. The relationship between the diagonal and any side of the square is 1 to 1.5, 1 point, just 1 second. No, trei chumshe, 1.4. So it's 1 to 1.4. That's basically pi. Actually, pi is more than 1 to. It's actually an irrational number. It keeps going on and on. Like 1.4, 1.4, whatever it is after that. So now, when we're talking about the diagonal from one corner to the other going through the square, if it was a diagonal of 1 amma, then it would be equal now to 1.4 or 1 2/5 of an amma. So the diagonal of a square, if you compare it with a ratio to any side of the square, is 1.4 to 1. Now, if you're talking about the circumference of a round sukkah that has to encompass within it a square of 4 by 4 amos, then b'shivsar nechi chumsha sagi, right? What that means is that all you would need for such a circumference to encompass a square 4 by 4 is 17 minus 1/5, which means basically what we're doing is we're taking 5.3 and multiplying it, and we're arriving at 16 and 4/5. Why? Because we're multiplying it by 3. We're not multiplying 4 by 3, but rather 5.3 by 3. 5.3 by 3, you can do the mathematics, is 16 and 4/5, which is in the language of the Gemara. Amsa, Shivsa, Neche means minus, Chum Shei Sagi, 17 minus a fifth, otherwise known as 16 and 4/5. And if that be the case, then Rabbi Yochanan has exaggerated. We're talking about something that's less than 17 amos. It's actually 16 and 4/5 of an amma. And Rabbi Yochanan establishes at 24 amma. That's a tremendous discrepancy. And the Gemara says, lo dak, that Rabbi Yochanan was not precise. He was sort of rounding it off. So the Gemara says, what do you mean rounding it off? Amar damrina lo dak. When is it logical to apply the principle of dak that he rounded it off? That's only purta. That's you're a small differentiator. If you have 16 and 4/5, you can round it off at 17. But to round it off at 24, which is a discrepancy of another 8 amos, is tuva mi amrina lo dak. That doesn't make any sense. That Rabbi Yochanan would exaggerate and jump up to 24 amos. Amalei Shisha Breder of Chizda, the Rav Ashi, Mi Savris Gavra, the Amsa Yosef. You've been assuming that a person takes up 1 amma, and therefore you understood that according to Rabbi Yochanan, if the Sukkah, which is round, can seat 24 people, then he meant that it would have a circumference of 24 amma, that each person takes up 1 amma. That's not true. Lasa Gavri, Bitarte Amsa Yosfi. You could put 3 people into an area of 2 amos. Each person does not take up a full amma. So therefore, if that's so, then even Rav Yochanan does not require a circumference of 24 amos. Okay, then, so I'm going to read again a footnote from the English. Just give me 1 minute just to get this down. He says the following: a man occupies does a man occupy a space of 1 amma? No. That's not true. But rather, he says Rabbi Yochanan did not reckon the space occupied by the people. I'm sorry, 1 second. Amalei Rav Asi. Just want to make sure I got the right place here. Yeah. Okay. Rav Mark Shisha. That's the challenge when you go from Hebrew. He says, do you think that a man occupies the space of an amma? No, 3 men occupy the space of 2 ammas. So that means that 1 man occupies the space of 2/3 of an amma, correct? So if you have 1 person times 3, that's 3 times 2/3, which is 6/3, and that's equal to 2 ammas. So kama havi lahu. Now let's calculate the circumference of the sukkah. Shitzah, it's 16. Why? Because we're going to multiply now 24 times 2/3. Anan shivsar nechichum shabe'inan. But we require 17 minus a fifth, which we said is 16 and 4/5. How could Rabbi Yochanan have already validated a sukkah when it's 16 amma in its parameters? So Gemara again wants to try low dog. Rabbi Yochanan was not careful and precise. He was just rounding it off. Down instead of up. Amar de amrin lo dak, lechumra, lekula bi amrin lo dak. Now we've come to the conclusion that we require that the sukkah have a circumference of 17 amos less the fifth, and he's rounding off to 16. He's telling you that a sukkah that has a circumference, a round sukkah that has a circumference of 16 amos is kosher. That's not so. We need a sukkah that's almost 17 amos minus a fifth. Rav Asi, Rav Ashi, Olam Gavra B'Amsios. You're right. Let's go back to our original premise. A man occupies one am. For Rav Yochanan, Makom Gavri Lo Choshev. In other words, where are these 24 people that Rav Yochanan is referring to? Are they sitting inside the sukkah or are they outside the sukkah? Meaning, he's not describing. Rav Yochanan's purpose is not to tell you how many people could fit in a sukkah that's round. That's not his goal. He's trying to give us the circumference of the circle. So therefore, what he is describing is the number of 24 people who are sitting outside the sukkah. And that's going to be a smaller sukkah. And that sukkah will have a diameter of 6 amos. Now let's see how we get the number 6 amos. Because we've been operating with 8 amos, right? 8 times 3 is 24. So we thought the circumference has to be 24 amos, and the diameter of that circle is 8 amos, which you can multiply by 3. No. The diameter of the circle is 6 amos. And we're going to multiply 6 by 3, which is 18. So until now, we have placed the 24 people inside the circular sukkah. And therefore, we came to the conclusion that the sukkah has a circumference of 24 amos, meaning 8 amos in its diameter times 3 is 24 amos in the circumference. This meant that the sukkah's diameter, the sukkah's diameter was 8 amos because the diameter is always 1/3 of the circumference. The Gemara now explains that the people are sitting outside the sukkah. The sukkah is represented not by the greater circumference measured around them, if you follow, around them, because they're inside, but rather by the smallest circle within the people, meaning the people are outside the circle. This smallest circle has a diameter of just 6 amos. Now, how do we get 6 amos? Because if you remember, we came to the conclusion now that let's just figure it out, that if you're talking about 8 amos to get 24, now we have the people outside the sukkah. Second. He says 1 amma, which is the depth of a sitting person, is deducted from each side of the largest circle. This is a Pnei Yoshua. So what we're going to do is we have now a larger circle, which is a circumference of 24 amos, and now we have the 4x4 square. What we're going to do is by taking the people outside the circle, we're going to subtract 1 amma from each of the 4 sides of the square. And that means minus 4 amos. So the smallest sukkah now is going to have a diameter of 6 amos, since we're going to subtract 1 amma from each side of the largest circle. And that's going to give us a diameter of 6 amos. Now, let's just figure out what would be the circumference of a circle of 6 amma. If the diameter of the circle is only 6 amma, we're going to multiply 6 by 3. That's going to give us 18. Oh, the Gemara actually spells this out. Kama avalahu tamni srei. We now have 18 amos, which means 6 amos in the diameter inside the circle. Multiply that by 3 to get your square. And b'shivsar nechi chumsha sagi. And now we just established that the measurement of the sukkah is 16 and 4/5 of an amo, or 17 amos less than a fifth. And now we're saying 18 amos. Just 1 second. Oh, so you're going to tell me Hainu de Lodak is Lechumra Lodak. This doesn't make any sense, if I understand the Gemara correctly. 1 second. Wait a minute. If he's saying that what? Amos. I had it before, but now I lost it. Let me just see. Sometimes the Hebrew is a little bit easier. Oh, yeah. Rabbi Yochanan, since he's now assuming that the diameter of the circle is 6 amos, he's requiring a circumference of 18 amos. But in truth, he told us that all you need. I had it. I keep having it and losing it. In other words, why does Rabbi Yochanan require? Oh, so now Rabbi Yochanan is saying that you need 18 amos, but in truth, it's enough to have 16 and 4/5 of an amma. Is Hainu de Lodak lechumra Lodak? The Gemara is now happy because Rabbi Yochanan is expanding the minimum size of this round sukkah, and in truth, he could have been more precise and more lenient. He would have allowed for 16 and 4/5 of an amma, but he said, you know what, you need 18 amma. So he was being lo dak but l'chumra. Now that is pretty much the end of this sugya. Again, we're only halfway through the daf for today. But now the Gemara has a very, very odd kind of digression, if you will. Rabbanan de Kesari, the rabbis from Caesarea, the Amrile, others say Dayane de Kesari. It was the judges in Caesarea. Again, these are very important scholars, and listen to what they say. Amri, they say that Igulo dinofik migori buya. If you put an eagle, you put a round circle inside a square, river, the eagle, the circle, is smaller than the, the ratio is 1-4, river. It's not 1-3, but 1-4. That's called Shetach ha'igul katan mishetach ha'meruba, b'shir reva mishetach ha'meruba. So the circle has an area which is 1/4 of the area of a square.